Welcome back. So in today's video, I'm going to talk you through 5 things I would do before starting a weight loss medication or peptides, GLP-1s, whatever you want to call them. Especially if you are sedentary, working executive roles, and you're spending a lot of time behind a desk and also having a huge decision capacity. I have scanned hundreds of people on the DEXA scanner on weight loss medications now, and I've seen multiple before and afters from before they use medication and after. I've seen really big drops in lean mass and muscle, and these are the things that I would recommend doing to prevent that muscle loss whilst you're on a weight loss medication. Why this is especially important for women working executive roles and long hours is, 1, you're going to be sedentary most of the day, which means that your actual muscle doesn't go through any sort of load or tension. 2, you're continuously on this high sympathetic level, kind of always stressed, always turned on, which also means that your recovery is much lower. And all of these things can accelerate muscle loss. Weight loss medications can be such a great important tool for women who are sat down most of the day because they're not burning many calories. So it can be very, very useful to try and aim weight loss, but it has to be done in a very safe way. So here are the 5 things that I'd recommend based on my expertise of x-raying people. Okay, so let's dive into it. So this is for any executive or CEO women working 60+ hour weeks, spending most of your time sat down at a desk. And if you're not quite sure if taking peptides or GLP-1s is the right fit for you. So here are 5 critical steps that I would do before you start to ensure that the journey is safe, smooth, and goes as well as you'd like it to go without competition getting worse if you were to stop. And just a very, very quick little recap here. Let me turn this mouse off actually if I can. So peptides or GLP-1s are a form of injection done weekly now, usually, most of them weekly, to reduce appetite by delaying gastric filling. The most popular ones are semaglutides, which is known as Ozempic, or Wegovy for the diabetic form, and tirzepatide, which is also known as Mounjaro. Now, these weight loss medications are not specifically targeting fat. They are there to help aid in weight loss by reducing the amount that you eat, okay? But that is not necessarily meaning that you're just losing fat. You will lose bone, you can lose muscle, okay? And this is what we want to try and stop from happening. So yeah, weight loss must not come at the expense of cognition, recovery, and productivity. Reduced body battery, feeling more fatigued, more brain fog, that can all be signs of reduced muscle loss. So things that we definitely need to look out for whilst your career is very high demanding for you. So let's go into the 5 things you should do before starting peptides. And I don't think a lot of these are spoken about too much on here from all the videos that I've seen as well. So first one, which is probably the one that most of us know the best now, is to learn how to track your protein intake, because it's an absolute non-negotiable to protect your muscle mass. A reduced appetite and a increased feeling of fullness, which is basically what happens when you're on a weight loss medication, usually means that there is less protein being eaten in comparison to other food types like carbs and fats. It is something that you need to learn to track before you start this weight loss medication, just to give yourself a bit of time. So it takes you a couple of weeks to adjust or to even practice getting up to this certain amount that you need to keep your muscle mass. And those first few weeks are really valuable, and you don't want to have that trial and error whilst you're on the medication and risk actually losing the muscle mass then. If you're not sure how much you should be eating, it is 1.6 to 2.2 grams of kilogram per body weight per day. There are going to be things that say it should be 1 gram per kilogram body weight, but in these instances we really want it to be on the higher side. So, and I've put an example there for you as well. So if a woman weighs 70 kilograms, it would be 1.6 to 2.2 times that number, so 112 to 154 grams a day. Now, your GLP-1s are going to make you feel more full. So the best way to get the protein in is by going for foods that have a 100 to 10 ratio of calories per protein. It just means that you're not having to eat loads and loads and loads of that food to actually get the amount of protein you need for that day. I've put a little list down on the side here for you as well. So for every 100 calories of chicken breast, there is 18 grams of protein. Same with lean mince, Greek yogurt, and tempeh. The best way to track your protein is just to get one of the little trackers on your phone where you can scan the barcode. You just have to weigh how much you're using. Okay, that's the only way. Or you can just put everything into a nice big list, put it into Google or into your supermarket website that you use, and you can also work it out that way. Moving on. Number 2 would be to get a DEXA scan before you start weight loss medications. If you're not sure what a DEXA scan is, it is a nice little x-ray that we take that measures your body fat percentage, your muscle mass, the bone density, and the fat around your organs or your visceral fat. Okay, getting a baseline is going to be really important because we know how much fat we actually need to lose to get into a certain percentage. We don't have to guess. A lot of the time when people are going through weight loss, they expect that they should be losing, let's say, 10 kilograms of fat, when that actually just isn't not possible. It's also really good because we can work out how many calories your body is burning at complete rest, because we have the most accurate amount of muscle mass that we can find through any sort of measurement. Me personally, I burn about 1,300 calories at rest, which means that we know there is a number you absolutely cannot eat less than. Okay, so if you have your DEXA scan, you can work out your basal metabolic rate to ensure you don't eat less than that number, and then we can also work out how many calories you're burning day to day, and then we can work out a nice little calorie window for you whilst you're on this weight loss medication. If you are not planning on tracking your calories whilst you're on weight loss medication, that is absolutely fine. I would still check maybe once a week, just to make sure that you're not eating less than what you burn at complete rest, okay? Even with the resistance training and tracking protein, if your calories are that low, you will lose muscle. Lovely. And also, part of getting a DEXA scan, and there's me there, is we can work out how much muscle you have lost afterwards. Let's say if you come back in 3 months' time, which means I can work out how many less calories you will be needing to eat to not put the weight back on after you finish. Okay. It's also good to see if and how much by your visceral fat has changed. Again, if you do go through quite a aggressive weight loss, because that is quite a stressful function for the body, sometimes the visceral fat remains unchanged because, again, it's very stress responsive, and because you just put your body through too much, visceral fat sometimes can stay the same. Number 3 is that you really should start resistance training before you go onto a weight loss medication. If you don't do it and you're really not a fan of resistance training, you're going to have to treat it like a non-negotiable chore. You know, something like hoovering or doing your laundry. You need to at least find one session, 45 minutes out of your week to lift weights. Okay. Ideally, I would want you doing 2 to 3 times a week, but I understand that might not actually be possible with the amount of hours you have to work at a desk. Okay, but at least once a week, even if you can find time on the weekend, is absolutely essential if you're going to go into weight loss medication. Without weight training, you can be up to 40% of your weight loss can be muscle mass, and I've actually seen more than that through DEXA scanning clients. I've seen some interesting changes, and just to give you a little bit of kind of like the science behind that, if I can nerd you out a little bit. I know a lot of us will kind of push resistance training without maybe kind of giving you an idea as to why it's so important. So there are 2 ways that we can try and maintain our muscle mass whilst in a calorie deficit. And the 2 processes are called mechanotransduction and mTOR C1 signaling. So mechanotransduction, kind of in layman's terms, it's just essentially every time that your muscle cells are under tension, or every time you're lifting the weights, the cell membrane will send a signal to the brain saying, you know, do not consume me. We are active tissue that is used to keep us alive and functioning. Okay, so when you are in a huge calorie deficit and you're not putting your muscle through any sort of mechanical tension, so no resistance, no load, those signals don't get sent, which means that your muscle mass might be used for energy, which means you might lose it. The other one is mTOR C1 signaling. So when you are in a calorie deficit, this signaling is reduced quite a lot, which basically means the production of muscle is delayed or is just stopped completely. when we lift weights, when we go through that tension, the mTOR-C1 signaling is actually increased, which means the mRNA translation, so the DNA, the kind of structural changes to your muscle mass, is increased, so we can initiate muscle protein synthesis again. So that is why it's really important that you should be resistance training from a physiological perspective. Number 4 is I would start to look at your recovery signs. Most people these days have some sort of wearable watch, which means that it tracks your heart rate, your sleep scores, and your HRV. And now, knowing when these change is really important, and I would start looking at these before you start your weight loss medication. So, I put a little table here. So if your HRV drops, if you see like a steady decline weekly of your heart rate variability, it's a sign that your nervous system is active overnight, and that's because it's trying to break down its muscle tissue to kind of be used as energy. Your HRV, or heart rate variability, is the time in between heartbeats, by the way, and usually if there's less variability, it means your heart's being used. Your resting heart rate will increase. So if your resting heart rate increases, because you've lost muscle, that means there's less blood, and it also means that the amount of blood per heartbeat is also reduced, which means that your heart then has to beat faster to get you to the same cardiac output as before. HR can spike in everyday activities as well. So if you see your heart rate increase when you're walking up the stairs, for example, that is because if you have lost muscle, that means there are less fibres, and that means that the remaining ones have to work harder to actually generate the same amount of force to get you up the stairs, which means your heart rate will increase. And the last one is just looking at recovery. So your recovery scores can go down even if your sleep duration stay the same. Again, just because your body has to keep working to eat the muscle. So they are signs to look out for. Last one we're going to look at is making sure that you have an exit strategy and that you're aware that you will need to have an exit strategy. Okay. Now, obviously, you will be taken off of this weight loss medication very gradually, which is going to be helpful. But the other things that you should do to ensure that you don't put on the weight even quicker than you lost before. Again, I would get a second follow-up DEXA scan just so we can measure the before and after. I can measure how many calorie difference we have at rest, depending on how much muscle you've lost, and also if your bone density has got worse. Again, that is symptomless and it's not something we can measure on the scale, really. So this is the only way to know if your bone density has got worse, and then we can try and improve it from there. You should plan for foods in high volume, low calories, and also high fibre foods to keep you full. Again, if you don't have that kind of delayed gastric filling, you might feel quite a sharp increase in appetite again. So best way to try and overcome that is to eat foods that are of higher volume but lower calories to try and keep you fuller for longer. Third thing I would do is try and increase daily movement where you can. I know that's going to be really tricky if you have to, do a lot of desk-based work. Even if it's getting off a tube stop before your office, if you can get 10 minutes out at lunch, if you have a standing desk or walking desk, all these things can be useful. Okay, but if your calories you burn at rest has gone down, then you have to be prepared that you might have a bit more daily movement that you need to be doing in order to not have to eat so little calories. And the last thing that I would do is prepare to go through a kind of workout block in strength, and this is something that I would do with my clients as well. Again, it is likely that the calories that you are going to be eating after you've come off that weight loss medication are actually closer to your maintenance calories, or can sometimes even be above that, and I would use that to your favour. So even if you are still in the deficit, that's fine. But I would use that opportunity to try and increase the strength of your muscles through specific training, through higher weights and lower repetitions, and that's also going to help you to kind of maintain your bone density again. So those are the 5 things that I would do before starting weight loss medication. I would start tracking your protein intake before. I would get a baseline of a DEXA scan. I would, bear with me, number 3. I would start resistance training, obviously, if you don't do that already. I would familiarise myself with where my recovery scores are, my wearable watches, and what they mean. And I would also plan for some sort of exit strategy already, and just be aware that you might have to change things after you've come off. And that's it, guys. I'll leave some details below about my coaching offer, and how again, if I was to be with a client, how I'd be going through things, especially if they were on a weight loss medication using lots of different medical testing. If you're interested, just read more below. Apart from that, hope to see you again soon. I should be making more content for women working executive roles and high demanding corporate roles as well. And if you obviously have any requests for content, then please just let me know.